To those who never want to have a child, what are your reasons? I'm too mentally unstable to provide a quality life for any potential kids. Edit. Good gravy. I woke up to a whole heap of responses. I genuinely hope all of you are feeling better today and in a better mood than yesterday. Our issues are ours to bear, and it matters that we keep trying to address them. I did have one nasty comment that is most likely a troll, so I'll say this much and end it. I went beyond self-diagnosis via internet and actually scheduled an appointment with a psychologist last month. This is in addition to being prescribed psychiatric meds from a different hospital. They were supportive and compassionate, but their assessment of me was that I was in need of hospitalization and that I should check myself into an inpatient center. Apparently, if you're too high of a risk of harming yourself, they won't take you on as a client because the duty of care burden is too high and they're not equipped to deal with that level of treatment. Of course, trolls being trolls, that individual is most likely stroking their genitals excitedly while reading this. If they even bother to read this, that is. Since I am the oldest, I call my experience the free trial, and to make things short, I don't like it. Edit. Wow, I never thought I would get so many likes. Thank you guys for the medals. It's so cool to know that I'm not the only one who had this view. Thanks and have a good one. I would make a terrible dad. Great uncle, but a terrible dad. Edit. Thanks to everyone for the positive and wholesome messages, and it is abundantly clear I am not alone in my opinion in this post. To add some context about myself, I am a few months shy of 19 and have a bit of experience with kids, but no chance of having one anytime soon. No GF or romantic history of any kind. Edit 2. Save your money, boys. I think I have enough awards. FK inexpensive. I'm stingy. I don't want something that takes up the majority of my life for the foreseeable future. I don't have the patience to deal with them. What's something inherently toxic that is perceived as normal? I'm surprised nobody else has said sleep deprivation yet. Sleep deprivation literally causes brain damage to the part of the brain responsible for happiness and memory. There is a reason military regulation requires soldiers be provided 8 hours of sleep. Because sleep deprivation is a form of torture. Not saying what you mean. The amount of sugar in everything. Asking a prospective employee to create a full-on project or develop content specific to the position applied for. You might not get the job, but the company has your intellectual property. And plenty are not above using it as their own. Not having boundaries with family. Particularly between parents and their adult children. I can't believe how frequently, but their family is used to rationalize and justify disrespect, manipulation, and various forms of abuse. I feel like a lot of never turn your back on family rhetoric is used by abusive people that think they shouldn't face consequences for their bullshit. Ex-homeless people. What are some things people don't know about the streets? At 16 and 18, troubled youth are dumped in homeless shelters. A distressing amount of long-term homeless adults are actually just mature homeless children, dumped in a shelter by the system at ages as young as 13. With no concept of any other life that exists, as they have been homeless for over a decade. Nowadays the youngest abandoned kids are 16 because that's when the foster care system can leave them in the shelter, with no ID, where they will survive with no financial help, unable to qualify for any benefits until they turn 18. 2 years after that is when the child is given a lump sum of approximately $1,200 to pay for an apartment, but they are not provided these apartments, or given any help getting them. A single bedroom costs more than $1,200. They have their ID and are allowed to make bank accounts and apply for credit, which no education has been provided to them about. For the next 3 years they get some money, but not provided with the needed life skills. Some lose their ID and proceed to be unable to contribute to society because they have no idea how to get it back. Others fall victim to fraud because they are sought out as easy prey. Some just have no idea how credit works, get locked into contracts with phone companies and end up with a lifetime of debts. Others just disappear. As an ex-foster child, I know of the whereabouts of about 40 other ex-foster children, approximately 20 years old. Out of that 40, 5 are not in a homeless shelter. 10 have completed high school. Half of them are employed. 3 have permanent housing. 1 is currently pursuing higher education. 2 have never used illegal recreational drugs. I used to know more people. The numbers would be higher than 40. However, 3 youth I was in care with did not live to see their 20th birthday. 2 died while being homeless and 1 committed suicide a few days after turning 18 because he didn't want to be homeless. 6 have fell off the face of the earth. I pray that they started a new life somewhere. They have been removed from the total as their whereabouts are unknown and they could be dead. 1 is currently on the missing persons list and has not been seen for 2 years. I've presumed her dead, or kidnapped. At the same time, a huge portion of the population is living paycheck to paycheck and are one missed shift away from not making rent. Some people who are homeless are working full-time, but just not making enough to get off the street because they don't make a living wage. I've met a homeless man who worked 2 full-time jobs in an attempt to get off the street, and used narcotics to attempt to manage living on 2 hours of sleep a night. He worked with me, and was a model employee. I've met a homeless person who was a legal citizen, but treated like an immigrant because they could not get a doctor to verify their identity for a new birth certificate. He volunteered full-time in a soup kitchen for 2 years until the person he volunteered for knew him long enough to verify his identity. Before he could get the paperwork together, the laws were changed to where members of the religious community, pastors, are no longer qualified to verify who you are for a new birth certificate. The shelters in most cities don't help house you. They kick you out after 3 months. Housed or not. The wait for low-income housing is 10 years with emergency status. A full-time position at minimum wage is not enough to rent a bedroom. If you are not a student, you can't rent a bedroom. People die every day in the winter because shelters get full. Then they are left to freeze to death on the street. When I was homeless at 16, I couldn't access the shelter because it was full. Adult shelters wouldn't take me because I was under 18. I was driven 800 kilometers by a drug dealer with 1 other youth to the next shelter that had any open spaces. The shelter mixed younger and older people. I was assaulted in the shelter in front of staff by a 30-year-old male. It was my first major concussion. The man was under the influence and my head got smashed into an old-school radiator. When he realized what he had done, he tried to help me. I couldn't stand up and was vomiting. He started crying and called 911 himself. The staff pressed charges against my will. He did not resist and was begging them not to send him to another shelter. Asked them to send him to jail instead. After the incident, me and another youth decided that it was warm enough and safer just to live outside. It actually was. We shared a campsite with a tattoo artist recently out of jail. He would cook for us, and we would take turns supervising his drug use in case he owed it. My friend and I at the time were completely sober. Did not even drink. Not all homeless people are drug addicts. Not all drug addicts are bad people. Not all homeless people can just get a home. Not all homeless people who stop being homeless can actually live like that. If you've been homeless for a long time, it can take years of being housed before you really get the hang of it. And often the damage sustained from being homeless will destroy you. After years of living just trying to survive, you often lose your ability to thrive. Some people completely lose their sense of self or worth from all the abuse and discrimination that they faced. At 16, I was homeless and by myself. I had ran away from my abusive home because I knew I was going to end up dead otherwise, so I took my chances with it. I lucked out. Managed to couch surf the majority of the time, and after a couple months I was taken in by a friend's parents who ended up adopting me. I was declared independent by the court, with them only having medical custody over me in situations where I was unable to make medical choices. However, we've always just said I'm adopted because people are way too nosy when you say you were declared legally an adult at barely 16. Things could have easily went horribly wrong with that situation, or just being homeless in general. Here are a few things I learned. 1. It's safer to be a guy. I nearly got kidnapped by some drunken creeps. After that, I borrowed a pair of cheap scissors and went to town on my hair in a gas station bathroom. I layered my clothes to try to hide my figure and practiced presenting myself as a guy. I passed as a preteen boy most of the time with all these steps, while I was still in danger being only 5'2" and 90-something pounds at the time. At least I didn't get cat-called or followed like I had been before. 2. It's hard to get a job while living on the streets, or even couch hopping if you don't have a permanent address. It's even harder when you don't have a physical copy of your SS number, even if you have it memorized. 3. People are cruel. Most people assume you're trying to scam them for money for drugs, or it's just a scam in general. If you're panhandling. While I did appreciate any offers for food, I also needed hygiene supplies and basic things like clothing or money for shelter at shady motels that don't bother to check IDs if you use cash. Panhandling already is awful as is. It's humiliating and degrading, at least for me personally. 4. At least in my area, the weather can change rapidly. This is common knowledge in general, but you don't realize how bad it is until you're stuck outside in it. A form of cheap housing is campgrounds if you have a tent, and they normally have a bathhouse on site. 5. People will stare at you with judging or questioning looks if you're brushing your teeth in a public bathroom or washing your hair in the sink. 6. Most local governments are against the homeless. They go out of their way to prevent people from resting or getting help. It's an endless cycle of asking for help, being turned down, then being told you should ask for help. 7. Unrelated but CPS as a joke. They take away kids who have loving, safe homes over their parents smoking weed every once in a while, but don't help the kids that need help. I know too many people who begged for help and they did nothing. I personally showed physical proof of abuse on me and offered up videos, pictures, texts, medical record, etc. to back my claims. They told me I wasn't allowed to surrender evidence as a minor and would contact my abusive bio parents to let them know ahead of time when they were visiting. They put my life in danger every single time they did that. I once had hand-shaped bruises all over my arms and bruising around my throat. I was told to go home when I showed up to their office. I fortunately got out of that situation and got to a safe place. I'm now a grown woman, looking at buying a house with my partner, and am almost finished with my degree. I consider my adoptive family my real family. I still hoard away money and food in case I ever end up in that situation again, as well as I keep several backup plans to feel more secure. I insist on carrying around care packages for the homeless in the car, and I will gladly hand out money when I can, because you never know what the person needs. If they spend it on drugs or alcohol, it's their body and choice, but I'm doing what I wish people had done for me. I encourage anyone who reads this to do the same. I guess the worst part for me was the lasting trauma. Sure, walking around in sandals because it's all you have when it's raining sucks. Sure, sleeping in public is terrifying. Yeah, homeless shelters are packed out. Borderline impossible to get a job. But the worst part was realizing I'd lost some fundamental part of myself and I wasn't getting it back. Innocence maybe? But it's more than that. It's like that Lily Allen music video where she's walking around with rose-colored glasses but the audience sees what's real. Yeah, well, you lose the glasses and you never get them back. There's nothing that fixes the trauma of knowing people who you thought were your friends or family were fully aware you had nowhere to go and didn't do anything about it. You can't fix that feeling of your best friend not returning your texts until you're back on your feet. Or the stares you get in the street when thousands of people walk past and don't stop. I'm physically okay now, but I'll never see people the same way again. I don't know how to. I'm a psychiatric RN who works with mostly homeless people. I have heard so many times where women who tested positive for meth have said they use it to stay awake 24/7 to avoid being raped by other homeless. Maybe more sad are the stories from women who haven't thought of that solution yet. Serious question. How do you best help someone out of homelessness? My stint on the streets was about 6 months and due to some bad decisions I made. But what sticks with me the most was the crushing boredom. No intellectual stimulus at all because it's safer to keep your distance from other homeless. And you're not going to have a chat with civilian out of the blue. So you're completely alone all the time. And to avoid putting yourself in risky situations, you stay on the move as much as possible. Most cities you can get some day labor work for quick cash, but then you have to be careful about people knowing you have cash. You're always on the lookout. The only sound night's sleep I ever got was when I could manage to scrounge up enough cash to get a room in a transient hotel for a night and basically pass out from exhaustion. Other than that, you're sleep deprived most of the time. And of course, all this is made worse if on the streets in winter.
Subscribe, my brothers.